14. Empty wine bottles and overflowing ashtrays littered my apartment. For the past 2 weeks, our flat had become an open house, with wild parties continuing for 3 or 4 days without stopping. Since Friday, I'd promised myself that come Monday morning, the party would end. At long last, I'd got the last drunk started down the stairs. It had taken over an hour to get rid of all of them, but now I could sigh with relief. Now, with the dawn breaking through the early darkness, I watched from my window the working men of the neighborhood preparing to depart for work. Milton's father, dirty as usual, stood in the street beside his car, talking to one of his neighbors. I watched him with disdain. His coveralls were grimy with filth. The old model car he drove matched its owner in shabbiness. My gaze flickered to my Cadillac. There was a feeling of triumph inside of me. I wasn't even half his age, and I'd already accomplished more than he ever would. Milton's mother could look down her fat nose at me if she wanted to pretend, but we both knew who had the sweetest end of the stick. Exultation overcame me as I turned and watched Diane dumping ashtrays. With my chest pushed out with pride, I walked over to the bedroom and opened the door. Boots and Vera were both laid out, side by side. They had danced so much over the past few days that they were just worn out. "Diane, why ain't you in bed getting some rest, girl?" I asked quietly. "You know I'm sending you to work later on today." She looked up from her cleaning and smiled shyly. "I just want to clean this mess up a little, Daddy," she answered innocently. A good pimp should try and know what his whores are thinking. Sometimes you would be put in an awkward spot, but most of the times you can guess just about what they have on their mind. "Quit lying, bitch," I replied coldly. "I know the only reason your lazy ass is up, faking like you're working, is on a slim chance that I gave you some meat this morning when I go to bed." Her eyes dropped, and she tried to look rejected, but just as quickly she rushed over and hugged me. "You gonna do a little something for me this morning, ain't you, Whoreson?" This was an ideal time to act chilly, but my defense was weakening. She was light chocolate, and her skin was as smooth as a baby's ass. When she smiled and looked up at me with her big bedroom eyes, I couldn't refrain from taking her in my arms and kissing those tender lips. As she pressed her young body against me, I knew that fate had dealt me a terrible blow. I'd been gifted with a tender dick. Bending over, I caught her legs and carried her towards the other bedroom. Her body had the smell of fresh roses, and her arms around me had the same effect as alcohol to the senses. When our bodies met, a shock of electricity went through my mind. We were caught up in the passion of youth, and my excitement exceeded all bounds. Later, with Diane snuggled against me gently snoring, I shuddered with horror at the thought of having to leave every morning for a job. I'd never had a job, and because of my environment and training, plus my dexterity at getting money, employment was unnecessary. My stable was growing. My mind wandered to the other 2 girls in the house, Boots and Vera. Not that I had 3 girls. It wouldn't be long before I was the best young pimp in the city. Here I was, at 17, with 3 of the youngest, wildest, and fastest whores in the country. How sweet it was. Pimpin' really had its good points. With the passing of Christmas and the following holidays, I was in good shape for the new year. Boots was able to go back to work, so I stopped her from doing any more boosting. Her boosting bloomers were packed away for later use. Many pimps would disagree with me, because quite a few pimps would rather have a booster than a whore. But to me, at this stage of my life, I didn't want anything but a flat-backing whore. The neighborhood theater, which went by the name of Duke, used to put on talent shows every Saturday afternoon. Since I was too young for the bars, I'd dress my 3 ladies up, get the car washed, and make my grand appearance, amidst much head-turning and adulation from the young would-be pimps in the audience. Ape, with a few more of my old gang, would have 2 rows of seats saved down front for the selected ones in our crowd. My girls enjoyed the adulation as we walked slowly towards our seats. My popularity was rising. The fastest young girls in the neighborhood would crowd down near our row, trying to catch my eye. This theater was to become the best establishment in the city for meeting potential prostitutes. One Saturday, while sitting down front, crowded in between many admirers, a group came out on the stage and swept the spotlight from me with their swinging arrangements. I stared in wonder at young Janet. She was still singing and getting better than ever. I watched her capture the crowd with song after song. The audience wouldn't let them leave the stage. Every time they tried to leave, the crowd would become so unruly that the owner would call them back on stage. After doing one more number, Janet must have decided to put a stop to the commotion herself. She came down off the stage, followed closely by the two girls who sang with her. She stopped in front of me and leaned over. "Whoreson, how about trying and getting us out of here?" she yelled in my ear. "Don't worry, baby," I said, standing up. "I can handle it," I replied with more confidence than I felt. The crowd was really yelling and kids were crowding into the aisle. I had grave doubts about whether I could get them out. One thing kept ringing in my mind, though. This young girl had "Star" written all over her, and I meant to shine bright in her eyes. Embracing Janet, I pulled one of her trembling girlfriends into my other arm. Catching Boots' eye, I yelled, "See if you can get Ape and some of the fellas to clear a path, baby." She nodded and ran over to him. With Ape and 5 more of the bunch in front of her, Boots started breaking through the crowd, with us right behind. With kicks and punches, they soon had kids climbing seats to get out of the way. Finally, we reached the protection of my car. All the girls piled in. I gave Ape enough cash for cab fare and some weed before driving off. "You can drop us off anywhere, Whoreson," Janet said quietly. I smiled and kept on driving. "I know you ain't gonna be rude enough to refuse an invitation to my place, Janet." She sighed and settled back against the seat, compelled to accept my offer by my apparent refusal to stop long enough to let them out. Within 30 minutes after our arrival, the capacity of my house was being tested. Teenagers were everywhere except the back porch, and that was only because of the cold weather. Janet sat down on the couch beside me. She was breathing heavily from continuous dancing. "This is the first time I've sat down since we got here," she laughed. "I've heard about some of the swinging sets you gave, Whoreson, but I didn't realize just how renowned you are. I'm glad you're really enjoying yourself, Janet. You seem so set against coming here that I figured you'd leave before everybody arrived." "Actually, I'm having a better time than I thought was possible, Whoreson." She touched my arm and gestured towards the dancers. "Seriously, though, Whoreson, just how long do you think this can go on?" "What do you mean, baby? The party?" I asked, looking down into her large, serene eyes. Yielding to her female wiles, she laughed lightly and gave my arm a pinch. "You know what I mean. These parties, prostitutes, you not working? How long, Whoreson, do you really think you can last? Noticeable as your Cadillac is, successful as pimping might be, you still don't have any solid foundation under you." It finally occurred to me that she was serious. Probably this was her way of letting me know that she would be available if I would give up the game. Naturally, I had no intention of ever giving up the game, but I didn't want to hurt her feelings. "Listen, sugar," I said softly, "name me one good job that I could get. Don't think about the caddy that I drive, or the diamonds that I wear, nor the silk suits that I look so good in. Just forget about those things and name me a decent job that I could get." She bit down on her lip for a moment. "Well," she began, "you probably have to go back to school for a while." She hesitated to see if I was taking this seriously before continuing. "Then after you graduated, you could—" She finished in a rush. "Get all kinds of jobs." "Be a little more precise, baby," I inquired of her, jokingly. She frowned and became very nervous. "Well, let me see," she said quietly. "You could, become a policeman." I laughed harshly. "At what police department, honey? One in China?" No, Whoreson, it's the truth. I ain't joking. My mother read it in the papers this morning. She said they're hiring colored men for all kinds of jobs on the force now." instead of being amused by her behavior. I was ashamed of myself. I realized that she was so innocent, she believed I might give up my precious possessions for love. "Whoreson," she said, her face shining with sincerity, "there are many girls who would marry you and not care if you didn't make a whole lot of money at work. They wouldn't care if you had to sweep floors, wash cars, anything. Just as long as you were theirs, it wouldn't make any difference what you did." She was looking at me with so much tender love in her eyes that I tried to joke her out of the mood. "You can easily say that, Janet," I said, "but I ain't seen none of these girls you keep talking about." Her eyes had tears in them as she stared up at me. "Just look at me, Whoreson," she said. "I'd gladly be your wife, but never your whore." After quite a circular route, there it was, out in the open. I had tried to keep the naked truth of her feelings from coming to light, but now the cards had been spread on the table, face up. She seemed so lovely, sitting beside me, that the thought of losing her was like taking a liquid bath with loneliness. I knew that my answer would hurt her. Even while I wanted to spare her pain, my customary glibness vanished. To me, the sound of my voice was harsh and sharp. "Janet, I wouldn't be a flunky to the white man for you or the Virgin Mary. Car washing, truck driving, or working in some honky's factory is out of the question for me." "Wait," I said, and grabbed her arm to prevent her from leaving. If my mother had left me enough money to set up a business or something, things would have been different, but since this didn't happen, the only way I can get big money without selling drugs is to manage sporting ladies. She listened to my raving until I was finished, then removed my hand from her arm. "Goodbye, Whoreson," she said bitterly. "Again, I wish you all the happiness in the world." Instead of following her, I watched her walk quickly to the door and leave. If there was one thing I disliked, it was to watch a woman cry, and I knew she was crying. Trying to maintain my air of composure, I turned and examined the crowded room. Boots dropped down in the vacant seat. She patted me on the cheek. "Don't worry, Daddy. You miss one shot, you get another," she added. "While you was talking to Janet, that light-skinned girl over there asked me if I'd mind having her for a wife-in-law." Coppin was just that simple. My fourth girl came to me just like that. I stared at her without too much interest. Boots' sharp remark brought me back out of the clouds. "What you looking so mournful about, Whoreson? I know it ain't over that skinny-ass Janet, but all she could do is sing to the tricks, 'cause she ain't got enough ass to stand no heavy pounding." I whirled around to give her a chilling rebuke, but her eyes were deadly cold, unflinching. Her voice dripped with venom when she spoke. "Whores go with pimps, Whoreson. Barbers go with manicurists, and square bitches go with square niggas." She pivoted on her heels and walked across the crowded floor. Her back was straight, her head held high. With the coming of summer, my stable of whores stayed anywhere between 6 and a dozen good prostitutes. Pimpin' was good, and my bankroll continued to swell. At times I would hear reports about Janet singing at different places, but I made it a point not to go anywhere that I might run into her. For some reason, she stayed in my mind, no matter how many different women I slept with. As the summer wore on and my stable grew, I tossed myself into one party after another and started trying to teach myself to take the bitter with the sweet.